Hello, and welcome to Higher Results, where workforce, business, and talent intersect. I'm Melody Reagan, CEO of Eye to Eye Workforce, and your host. On Higher Results, we cover all things related to the life cycle of a worker, from hiring, recruiting, performance development, all the way through to even retiring and terminations. We also talk about careers on Higher Results. We are every Tuesday at 3 p.m., and you can find us on Facebook at /Higher Results. Today, our topic, we're doing a part 2 on working remotely and leadership. Now, at our last show, and returning with us today, is we have Trina Hoefling and her co-founder, Kacher, who is joining us today. And we're going to jump into some questions, but before we do, I have a couple of things I want to do as a setup. Last time we talked about markets. Now, today what we want to talk about are the struggles that businesses and organizations are having with embracing remote workers and what it means to be a remote worker. There are some pretty serious things that we have to do to be effective in this changing environment. Now, I want to remind you of a couple of statistics, and there are things that are becoming even more so. So what's happening with remote workers? Well, a couple of things. There's a recent study that I was looking at where the rate of remote workers is accelerating, is what I want to tell you. A recent study of business leaders at the Global Leadership Summit in London found that 34% of these businesses, now these are international businesses, said more than half of their full-time workers are going to be remote by 2020. 2020 is not that far away, right? 25% said that more than 3/4 would not work in a traditional office by 2020 as well. So a couple of new statistics, and then last time we also talked about Gallup and the statistics that Gallup had. But why is this that we want to do remote working? Does it have benefits? Well, let me share with you another study by PGI. PGI said that they found 80% of remote workers reported higher morale. Pretty impressive, in my opinion. 82% said it helped lower their stress levels. And guess what? One of the things that's lowering their stress level, they don't have to drive. Driving in cities anymore is becoming pretty intense and taking a tremendous amount of time. And the other thing that they found, you're going to love this, 69% lower absenteeism. So what that means is, I can see some things where we're getting a little better productivity. So with that, I want to turn to our guest today. And of course, we're doing this in a remote working situation. And I just want to start off, and I want to share with everybody, all three of us are in different locations. So I would love it if Kathy and Trina, you would both share where you're at and then do a quick introduction. Really thrilled to have you back here, Trina Hoefling, and Kathy Kacher, her co-founder of the Smart Workplace. I am so happy to have both of you here. So Trina, would you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Trina Hoefling. It's nice to be back with Melody and all of you at Higher Results. I am calling in from Cripple Creek, Colorado, the high country of the Rocky Mountains. And I have been home now for nearly 2 weeks working out of my house, which is really nice. Prior to that, I was working from Central America. And prior to that, working from Dallas, speaking at an HR conference with Kathy. So what I love about remote work is as long as I can get online, I'm at work.
Fantastic. And you guys online, I'm going to share, Trina has written several books from working virtually, et cetera, and we're going to make sure that you have links to those online. And Kathy, where are you? I feel like a little Waldo here. Where in the world?
Where in the world? I'm not wearing a striped hat, so I don't know if you'll be able to spot me. Today, I am coming to you from Minneapolis, Minnesota, where we are experiencing day 4 of rain and a little bit of chill and dreariness. So it's lucky that I was able to get up and join the call. It's kind of a downer here. So I'm in Minneapolis. I've worked remotely for the past 10 years. I do a lot of traveling, so actually I'm prepared to work from anywhere. And for the first time ever this winter, my intention is to work from Phoenix, Arizona for a month. I'm going to take that out for a spin and see how it works. And,
fantastic.
I'm looking forward to that. So
excellent.
And that's where I am.
Just to let everybody know, both of these amazing leaders are remote working specialists. And they actually have a depth of expertise in flexible work arrangements. So we're going to jump in. Today, what we want to talk about is the how-tos. How-to from a business perspective and how-to in being a remote worker. So I want to start off with, for both of you, is remote working really good for all companies? And, what are the benefits? So, Kathy, what do you think?
Well, the first thing to remember is that no, there is no one size fits all. And actually, when it comes to remote work, there's hardly a one size fits one. But all companies can use remote work as a business strategy when they have the right tools in place. And that's the key. They have to have the right tools and, of course, the right leaders, or at least they have to train up the leaders. I think you did a really good job of outlining what the benefits are in your opening. You talked about lower stress level, lower absenteeism, and increased productivity. But the interesting thing is, no matter how many studies report that, many organizations will say, well, yeah, but I don't see that coming out in my bottom line. Show me on the spreadsheet where this is really happening. So interestingly enough, for the past few years, I've been working with organizations who are using remote work as part of their real estate strategy. And that's where the organizations can see that financial benefit, because at the end of the day, that's really what they're interested in, is the financial benefit of remote work. It's a nice, some say, well, it's nice to do, and we have these soft ROIs, but I want to see the bottom line. And so by aligning it with the real estate strategy, they really do see the benefits that way.
By the way, I think that's just a great observation. And today, in fact, in real estate, we're building more work-live structures for people.
Absolutely. Yep.
And other benefits that we can think about, too, are environmental. Think about it. Fewer cars, although the greater our population, the more cars that we have. But it also saves time. I have to tell you, I am not a person who enjoys driving. It is a means to the end. And so it's like, if I could avoid driving, which I really love, and I get more productivity. That hour that I normally would have spent in a car, I get to spend at my desk getting great things done. So fantastic. Well, let me ask, are there companies, Kathy, that you think, or jobs that you think are better fit for remote working compared to others?
Well, I think there's jobs that are easier. They're an easier fit for remote working. If you think about like transactional roles, that's a great way of implementing remote work because it's so easy to track that productivity. But any role that doesn't require that on-site presence, like manufacturing or personal services, your hairstylist that can't be remote, retail. But we have an assessment tool on our website, thesmartworkplace.com, that people can take that really takes them through the questions that will help them determine if remote work, at least some of the time, is a good fit for them. And I think, Trina, you might have ideas around this as well.
Yeah, I think Kathy made a key point is that at least some of the job, we can conduct, or you can yourself conduct a job task analysis, because a lot of times at least what we find is 60 to 70% of the job is remote workable, even if it's not all workable. In a remote fashion. So a lot of employees are working remote most of the time, but not all of the time, which is also great for keeping your culture going, keep your team connected, keep everybody connected to the culture of the organization too, because you do come together once in a while.
So just as far as, and I love that you said this, we'll make sure that we have a link to the questionnaire that you have for me to assess which jobs from a remote working perspective. Fantastic. And remember, I love the name of your company, just so you guys know, the Smart Workplace. That's just so fantastic. And one of the things that I love that you just shared, when you think about a remote worker, don't think that it's just 100% of the job. It's not binary. Right. There's some jobs that may be 100%, like you could put somebody in customer service because technology allows that and they could work remotely. There are others that it might be a half and half. Part of the time they work remotely and part of the time they work together. And then you create a more collaborative shared work environment. Going back to what you said, Kathy, about real estate, I can share in that shared working environment instead of having a one-to-one office and changing things so that I get better economies of scale. Fantastic. Okay, so here is, if I'm thinking about, and I'm the worker and I'm thinking about remote working, are there certain things that just even in jobs that immediately come to mind? I know I can do the assessment, but that immediately come to mind that would be good for me as the worker to do remote work?
That's a really good question. I think for any remote worker, having the right training and the right resources that enable them to do it. So Trina and I, when we were speaking in Dallas, I had done some recent research from Technalysis and learned that like 78% of the people using technology are using the bare minimum. They're using what they have to use. It's so hard to stretch yourself. But it's amazing what you can do with technology. So I think for remote workers to become more savvy, they have to step back and take some time and really explore the technology that's available to them and figure out how they can use it so people are really understanding and recognizing the value they bring to the organization, because sometimes it's hard to see when they're not on site. So many leaders say, oh, look, they're in their chair. Oh, that means they're amazingly productive. Not true, but it's a perception. So really understanding the technology and then any other resources, using video, like we're using video today. I was all upset. I'm like, oh my gosh, we have to use video. And I'm a remote worker. These are the tools that are going to help them be recognized for the great work they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I love that you're bringing up tools. We're going to come back to tools because I'm going to look for some recommendations. But before we're there, I'd like to talk about how being a remote worker and leading remote workers changes what that means for each of us. Because I think it requires some differences in being a leader, and you've mentioned training. And I also think that it requires some different behaviors for the actual worker. So let's delve into that with, if you are leading remote workers, how do I need to change? Because exactly what you said, Kathy, a very classic way of leading is line of sight. I see that you got here from 8 to 5, right?
Yeah,
and
winner.
The thing that I can do is I can do what I call drive-by leadership. I can stick my head into your office or hit you up at the cubicle and say, hey, take care of this now. And it's just the leadership. So how does leadership have to change?
Oh, the leadership. Well, first of all, they have to be so much more intentional about how they connect with their team. So when the term out of sight, out of mind, that's not just a saying. I mean, that's an actual human condition, literally, like back to the caveman days. When people are out of sight, they tend to go out of our mind. I was actually doing a focus group last week, and I heard more than one person say, well, I went to their desk and they weren't there. So this person was working on remote that day. I went to their desk and they weren't there. So I went and I found somebody else. Really, that's what you did? Okay, so it just goes to show that it's true. So leaders especially have to bring their teams together no matter where the people are located. We have, back to the website, but we do have a lot of tips about that. We have a couple of free trainings for leaders too on a Kickstart program on how do you keep your team connected and feeling like they belong. So you have an excellent experience across your team. And by having the excellent experience, of course, you improve output and results. And I know, Trina, you have lots of ideas. I mean, Trina, I think, was in Australia talking about this for several weeks last year. So,
yeah, well, it's kind of, I think one of the things that changes when you're a virtual leader is we always know we need to do coaching and development of our team members. But I don't know that leaders always think about in a virtual setting that we need to do virtual team development of the rhythms and the flows and the communication pathways and the work processes of the team with each other and with the rest of the organization. In a traditional environment, we do a lot of one-on-one coaching, but virtual leaders also need to do team coaching. We were talking about tools a few minutes ago. Part of team development is, as a group, making some team decisions about which tools do we use for what purposes, so that we're not spread too far out across a dozen or 15 different tools. We have a core 3 or 4 places that we go to find each other for certain things and to connect. So developing the team in terms of their communication and habits and choosing the tools that we're all going to default to. And then the second piece that's more intentional, Kathy used the word intentional, is to actually support the team as the virtual leader to encourage them to be virtually present, to reach out to stakeholders in the organization, to make sure that just because you're not in a physical building doesn't mean you're not present. And that falls to both the team leader and the team member, but the leader really has to take that initiative and then drive that forward to helping the team see the results of their efforts. One of the true disadvantages of virtual work is you don't always see the team dynamic, you don't always see the team results and the team outcomes. So a lot of times the virtual team leader needs to help the team come together, see their work and the results, and to celebrate that. Nobody wants to be a team more. Nobody wants to be on a team more than when they're on a winning team. Right. So that's a big part of it, is help the team realize how powerful and effective they are when they can't always see what everybody else is doing. That's a couple things I'd say.
I actually think that's a really great point. When they're remote, they don't necessarily see the accomplishments of the whole team.
Right.
I love what you said, Kathy, when you started out with intentional. One of my observations of leaders is intentional is with remote workers, it's about results. Mm-hmm. So you really have to plan ahead and say, these are the things that need to get done, as opposed to being just chronically reactionary.
Right.
And, what's interesting is we think, like, if somebody who works in fast casual food, we think that's very reactionary. Mm-hmm. Somebody places an order and you respond. Well, believe it or not, in corporate America, a lot of professionals behave in a very reactionary manner.
That's how they live.
Yeah, exactly. Better productivity comes from planning and understanding what needs to get done, et cetera. And one other observation that I want to point out with working remote. In corporate America, when you work with everybody, we have tended, and in fact, our leaders calibrate to this, they tend to be high verbal. If you look at it, our leaders and the ones that we reward are very high verbal and extroverted. And that's what we have modeled after. Well, if you're going to deal with remote workers, it's not just about being verbal. You have to put things in writing. You have to work across both modalities, not just talking at somebody, because you have to be able to track things and communicate and to clarify. So exactly what you said as far as training and educating leaders to be leaders, the tools and the capabilities of a leader managing remote workers, in my opinion, makes them a better leader across the board.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just kind of another good word for management.
It is, and for good management, right? Mm-hmm. So I totally think that is the case. Now, let's do a little pivot here. Somebody wants to be a remote worker. What should I be considering? And I'm going to tell you, different people have different needs. Some people are more suited to being a remote worker versus others. Not to say that everybody can't learn something or partially work remotely, but what do I need to consider if I want to be a remote worker?
I want to jump in here. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be semi-serious and semi-facetious. The first thing I would consider is who's my boss. Because who that person is and how well they support me and connect me back to the organization is going to drive how engaged, at least partially drive how engaged I am. I have some responsibility for that too, but who my boss is a key linchpin to success.
That's okay. That's fair. It is. Because you have to, if you're going to do remote working, it's about your infrastructure, which we're going to come back to tools. It's about your leadership. But let's talk about the workers. So what are your thoughts about workers and what do they need to know, or what do they need to contribute? Because I think good performance comes from the boss and the worker, and they both have to come together in partnership.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, the basic behaviors that a remote worker needs. They have to be a self-starter. They have to be pretty good at troubleshooting. They have to be able to remain calm, because they really are, for the most part, they're alone. You can't run down the hall and get somebody to come and, assist you if you're having an issue. You've really got to be able to problem solve on your own. So there's some very core competencies as individual strengths that they need to have in place. And the other piece, I think many employees can find after they've worked remotely for a length of time, they start to feel isolated and disconnected. So they need to have a good personal network, and they need to make sure that they're, getting up and taking care of themselves. Again, back to the focus group I did last week, we talked with employees, and one woman said, when I work from home, I get so much done. I'm so productive, but I look down at my I forget what they're called. The Fitbit. Yeah, the Fitbit. I look down at my Fitbit and I see I have gone 200 steps in a day. Mm-hmm. That's not good, And then there's I don't know if you've heard of the telework 20, but it's just like the freshman 20. It's the 20 pounds you gain when you work from home. So you have to have some self-control as well.
And I would add to that there's a proactive stance on your career management that changes a little bit in a virtual environment. It's a lot easier to be seen when you're in the physical space, when you're in the conference room, when your facial expressions and your tone of voice is there. When you're in a video conference or you're just a background person whose face isn't right there, sometimes you just have to be a little bit more assertive about speaking up for yourself, about asking for that opportunity to be on a task force that perhaps my manager who's not quite as used to thinking about me as a virtual worker starts thinking about me more. So it's not really being aggressive so much as it is being assertive and saying, I can do this, I can be part of this. Is there an opportunity for me to get some interface with such and so over there? So being a little bit more intentional about your own career and getting credit. There's a lot of, I think, mythology around introverts make great virtual workers because they don't like people anyway. And that's completely inaccurate.
That's not true.
No, it's not true, but it is a perception that is out there. And what we've actually found is the introverts do okay in a virtual work environment, but extroverts actually do better because they are more motivated to reach out and connect with people. We need it.
And Trina and I have talked with many remote workers that early on in their experience, they kind of sit at their desk and tap their fingers together.
What do I do?
Somebody's going to call. I wonder what's going to happen next. So there can be a lot of uncertainty for especially a new remote worker, waiting to be engaged. And like Trina said, it's up to them. That visibility, staying connected, that's a two-way street. The leader has to be intentional about staying connected, and the individual has to take an entirely different approach to staying visible.
Right. So. And I'm going to go, not go negative, but, we're human beings. And when we don't have context and information, most of us tend to get a little unsure, a little unclear, a little more uncertain. And that virtual isolation, that what are they really thinking about me? And what did they really mean by that email when they said, get your ass, whatever it happens to be.
All caps.
We really need to kind of self-monitor our own emotional reaction and say, did they really mean it the way I heard it, or am I misunderstanding? I think a good assumption or a good quality to carry forward is to assume positive intent and to start with swift trust, because Kathy and I are often joining teams that are always temporary and sometimes very short-lived. So being able to jump in and become part of something quickly with confidence and assume positive intent, unless you find out that somebody really is that much of a jerk. But that's the rare exception. It's not the everyday reality. That helps us kind of step through that insecurity, that emotional isolation, and say, I can just ask a question and clean this up real quickly rather than sit here and fester and think that this is.
And don't resolve it through email. So some tips for remote workers, especially newer, is go ahead and use the video. Use your video and drop in and chat with various people on your team. Use the chat feature frequently. Set up some virtual coffee breaks with your colleagues, and then find some ways to have fun. Sometimes these days organizations are creating their super cool open workspaces. They got a ping pong table and they got, foosball. So set up virtual games with your teams, dice with buddies or the word game, whatever it is, but do virtual things so you're having fun together and not just getting on meeting after meeting after meeting.
Fantastic. Okay, so you guys, and I love that. By the way, in this partnership, one of the things that I think that it also balances back with what you said is you talked about leaders, those that are managing remote workers reaching out. I think the other thing, and this is something I am committed to as a leader, is I'm pretty much a WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. I'm really straightforward. And I tell all of my team members, if I'm happy with something, you're going to know it. And if I'm not, you know it. And you don't have to break code with me. And the other thing is I move. I don't hold on to things, which it is a change in leadership because we're kind of used to soft pedaling and people aren't really sure, well, does she really like me or doesn't she? Does she value this or doesn't she? And I'm pretty straightforward. And I think that with remote workers, you need to be straightforward. I think that the more transparent we all are, the better we perform on both sides. And transparency is something you can achieve and be professional at the same time. So just as far as a consideration for everybody, and it goes both ways. So, okay, let's talk. We've been talking about tools because tools matter. What tools, now one that we've already said, and I'm going to chuckle about this, Kathy, because you're like, oh, video.
I know, it's true.
Video. One of the things is my company, Eye to Eye, part of the reason is that
nice.
Eye to Eye. I think that there is something to be said about how you go about connecting with others and that you can see them and build that relationship. So I think using video, not just your phone, not just making a call, whether it's FaceTime, whether it's a webinar tool, whatever it is, I think that you should be connecting over video. What other tools do you think?
Well, go ahead,
Trina. Oh, Jinx Novak, your turn.
Hey, that happens in person too.
Yeah. But I could see her going in, as opposed to remember when you're on the conference call and everyone's going, you can't.
Yeah,
at least I could see her lean forward and say, so here's the video. I could see you had something, so you go.
Well, I think what I was going to say is there's so many tools, so many plugins, many apps that it's overwhelming. So one of the things Kathy and I do is, what do you need to communicate about, with whom, and why, and how often? And then you can start picking the tool that works. Whether you're, like Kathy and I have set up a Trello and a Slack account that we don't use because we basically default to the Skype chat room because we've got Skype open as our ongoing open chat. We can move from text to phone to video like that, and it's just always open. Whereas Zoom, it's a specific conference that's being scheduled for recording purposes. So for Kathy and I, we just kind of default to Skype because it has everything we need for ongoing connection and spontaneity.
Yeah.
And so we don't need Trello or Slack. We're a very small team of 2. But if we were managing multiple clients, I've got another group that I work with. It's a virtual tribe, and we default to Slack. So that's the tool we use because everybody is on it anyway. So there's not really a right or wrong. It's like you have to have video capabilities, as we've talked about, and you can use a couple tools, Zoom, GoToMeeting, as well as Skype. But the key is to keep it as simple as possible to give you the connections you need without confusion. That would be.
And one other, I'm going to put in there Google. Google does.
Right.
Google has some amazing tools. I love, though, that you're talking about multimodal, where you're in video, chat, and the ability to call. I would say are your 3 basics with working remotely. You need to have those. Your bursty communications are just as important as your connected communications like us. And in fact, they've done studies on creativity in that bursty communication. I will tell you, I have 2 virtual companies. I live on chat, where I'm chatting. We email, we chat, we email, we call, we video, we do share screens, just as far as having those tools. But my ability to chat with people is really, really important because it goes back to what you said, Kathy. When I'm trying to solve, it's how you bring those resources together. I've got a problem. I can ping over and go, hey, Kathy, have you ever done this? Or what do you recommend for? And get that quick feedback that you would otherwise get. So Fantastic tools. Any other thoughts on tools or techniques?
I think teams need to come together to decide about how they're managing their projects and documents. And that's, there's more companies onboarding Office 365. There's a lot of awesome tools that are available. But again, back to that 78% of people are still, saving to the hard drive, emailing the document, so getting them to use OneNote and OneDrive and, those collaborative tools that are available is something that teams, it doesn't happen naturally. Mm-hmm. Or, well, maybe it does over years, but if you want to onboard rapidly, teams need to step back and have a discussion about how do we want to do this? How do we want to save our documents? And I'm doing, for the first time, I'm on a team that's using these fully. So it's the first time I've had the experience myself, because I do a lot of work independently. But it's been very interesting to how we came together. We picked the tools we're going to use, and now, all these are available and we're using them. And it's awkward sometimes, and it can be clunky. But once you get used to it, you're way better off.
It goes back to the team development thing. If you learn how to use the tools together, you can have some fun with it. You can be less self-conscious for not being perfect, and you develop your rhythms and your habits as a team too.
You know what? Absolutely. One of the things, Kathy, though, in terms of categories, because I just want our audience to know what are some of the fundamental tools. I think a team collaboration tool, and what I think that's at the heart, and what that is exactly how are you tracking and coordinating on deliverables? Right. How are you tracking and coordinating your documents? And when you are in a document share, which in complement to what you were sharing, Trina, in being multimodal between your chat and being able to make phone calls and having video calls. One of the things about the team collaboration in an old school, what I see some of my clients that they end up doing, and they have remote workers, and they have a distributed structure where they have people in multiple states and multiple countries. They're living still off of paper or email. Mm-hmm. I happen to have 2 remote companies, and we work with a collaboration tool called Teamwork. Mm-hmm. And Teamwork is a fantastic tool. It does Gantt charts, it has tasks, it has milestones, it has team members in it, message board, links. And at any point in time with both of my companies, I can actually go in and see where we're at on a project with a client. Yeah. I don't have to pick up the phone and call somebody and go, hey, Trina, what's going on with X? Because I can go in and I can see it. And if I have questions, I can send those questions or chat those questions. And I can see the allocation of resources.
It's your new office. It's your new office.
It is your workplace. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's
lost without it.
Microsoft is coming out with something new. One of the teams of the company I work with is called Microsoft Teams. That's a new thing. And so it sounds like, I think Microsoft waits for people to develop cool things, and then they say, aha.
I think you're right.
Yeah, there's kind of like a couple of categories of tools. There's the enterprise tools, which is the Microsoft 365 and all of the plugins that go along with that Kathy's referring to. And then there are those that are for the small virtual companies and Google Plus is the easiest. Everything you need is right there in Google Plus. I like Insightly because it's both a project management and a sales tracking tool. So there are really good tools for us small enterprises that don't need we don't need ERP.
And by the way, small enterprises, small to mid-sized businesses, we constitute the majority.
That's right.
Of businesses in the United States. So it's truly solving for us. Well, ladies, I'm going to end with one question because I'm actually over time because I love this subject so much. And I'm going to ask you to come back and join me again. What I'd love to do is go even a little deeper on jobs and some techniques that you have for managing, because I think this is where the world is going, and we could have another fantastic conversation about it. But what would you say right now is either, what's that, one, pay attention as a leader of a remote workforce and then as a worker? What's that kind of that one gotcha, like pay attention, don't let this get you? What would you say?
I would say when in doubt, speak up and ask and get clarity. And it doesn't matter your role, whether you're the leader or you're a temporary team member or you're a permanent team member. Just don't wait, because you need to be aligned. And if you're just 1 degree off from where you need to be, if you let that go long enough, now you're 10 degrees apart and you've got rework to do. So I would say just consistently seek clarity.
By the way, I love that, because you are so right. Rework rework can just get you, because exactly, seek clarity. Fantastic. Kathy, what do you say?
Yeah, I would agree with Trina. I think that when you asked the question, the one word that popped into my mind was clarify. Clarify. Clarify expectations, especially if there's little or no face-to-face conversation, because we all know, I think, that 80% of the meaning of a message comes from that nonverbal, that leaning forward, the nodding. All of that happens in a place that most remote workers don't see. So that can lead to all kinds of communication breakdown and interrupt workflows. So leaders need to definitely be mindful and intentional about staying connected and making sure their expectations are very clear.
Yeah.
Awesome. And, I would like to wrap just by saying a lot of people think that these are special things that you need to do for remote workers. The truth of the matter, these are common mistakes that we make even when we're in a face-to-face.
Right.
And to be a good leader with remote workers and to be a strong remote worker applies whether you're remote or in person. These are just good practices for business and for workers. So I want to thank both of you for being with us today, and I want to thank all of you for being with us today. We air every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Mountain Time. You can find us on Facebook /Higher Results. In addition to that, please visit my website, i2iworkforce /Higher Results. Beautiful thing about that is you can see the recordings of our past videos. We're also going to be adding podcasts, and I'm going to have a bunch of links for you to Trina and Kathy's website. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day, and we'll see you online.